Hey First Pres, What's Up is coming to you from First Presbyterian Church in York, Pennsylvania, providing pertinent and helpful information, inspiration, and encouragement in these challenging times.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Hey First Pres, What's Up? I'm Guy Dunham, your host, and I have the honor to bring back a repeat guest, our Director of Youth and College Ministries, none other than Delass Johnson. Hi, Delass.
Hey, Guy.
This is cool. This is cool. I was thinking about it when I was getting ready, and I thought, my gosh, you've been here 18 months.
Oh, my God.
Can you believe that? Now you will agree that time flies when you're having fun, correct?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so much has changed. So much has changed since
Absolutely.
you first came here. And so we got a lot to cover
Oh, wow.
today.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can get in. If not, I'll just have to ask you back again. But anyway, we have people who may be watching this time that don't know you. We have a lot who do and others who don't. So we want to make sure we talk a little bit about you, where you came from, your family, and where you did your undergraduate studies, et cetera, et cetera. You know this. I already told you what we're going to talk about. So that gave you time to think about it. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, to talk about myself, I guess I would start with I am a mama. I have 3 kids, Zion, who's 16, Journey, she's 8, and I have Zara, who's 2. And now one of the members here, she calls Zara Zorro because she understands that she's a handful.
Zorro.
She calls her Zorro. But yeah, I have 3 beautiful kids, and we are up here in York now, originally from Baltimore, born and raised. I am number 11 of 13 siblings. And I don't know what else to say about Delass.
Well, where'd you do your undergraduate?
Undergraduate studies. Now, this is funny. I just had this conversation earlier today with
Really?
Yeah, with one of the students. I did a one-on-one with one of our college students today, and we talked about just my undergraduate experience. But started off at a community college in Baltimore County, and then I transferred to Coppin State, and then I finished at Walden University.
Okay.
So I kind of bounced around, and we talked about just some of the like the discipline that was needed, giving just my situation, my how I grown up and what I was used to, and just the discipline that was necessary in order for me just to get through undergrad.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, but it made you who you are?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was, for me, just I'm the first of any of my family to graduate from college, to graduate from high school.
Wow.
So, and just looking back at it, it's a major accomplishment that, some people I feel like it's natural. It just comes as second nature. It's just a thing to do. But for me, growing up in my household, it was a huge deal because it was not something that had been done or something that they were used to seeing.
Yeah.
Just thinking about my parents. My dad was a city boy. He grew up in Baltimore City. But his family's originally from Eastern Shore.
Okay.
But my dad went to school in Baltimore City, and he went up into the 11th grade.
Okay.
And some would say, well, why would he drop out in 11th grade? He didn't drop out. He got suspended. And what we don't really talk about in our family is My dad's mom and dad both passed away while my dad was a kid.
Really?
And so his older sister raised him.
Okay.
And so when it was time for him to get back to school, older sister could not take him back to school.
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to finish school.
Yeah.
And with my mom is one of 21. My grandparents had 21 kids.
Holy moly.
But when we think about it, like to us, it's like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Like 21 kids, why would they have 21 kids? But my mom grew up in South Carolina.
Okay.
My granddad was a sharecropper.
Right.
You know, my mom and her siblings, they picked cotton and they picked tobacco on the fields.
Wow.
And so having that many children meant that was, you know, they were able to work that much harder through the day because you had more children to put to work.
It's like a whole family business.
It was a family business. My mom said at 2 years old, the kid would get it, some of them younger than that. If you were able to walk and talk and, you know, get around, 18 months, you may have a sack on your shoulder across you, strapped across you, and you're picking cotton, picking tobacco. And so this is my mom's upbringing.
Yeah.
And my granddad, he passed away when my mom was 12. And that meant that my grandmother now, she's there with 21 children to raise. And these are sharecroppers, the poorest of the poor people, you know. Yep. My mom says that they grew up in a shack on someone's farm.
And of course we know the experience in sharecropping that oftentimes the owners of the farm and such didn't really pay them fairly.
Oh, absolutely.
They'd find
not.
every which way they could cheat them.
Absolutely.
So that they may have been worth a lot more, but they didn't get the money.
Oh, no. I mean,
it was not really sharing.
No, it was not at all. It was not at all sharing.
No.
You know, and so just in conversation with my mom, my mom had a total in her life of 3 years of school. She never went to school in South Carolina.
Oh, gosh.
So they moved to Maryland, and my mom she was 12 years old in the 3rd grade. And you can imagine like the bullying and the being picked on. You're 12 years old, and your accent is so heavy. Your Southern accent is so heavy, and you're talking to people, trying to make friends, and you know it just really wasn't working out. And she went from the 3rd grade and to the 5th grade. They put her in the 5th grade, thinking that this puts her with kids that are more closer to her age. And then from the 5th grade, the 6th grade, and in the 6th grade, my grandmother had to go up to the school to make sure that my mom can get enrolled and everything. And now you're talking about a woman who's never had any schooling. My grandmother had no schooling. And so for my grandmother, getting my mother into school wasn't a big deal. And so that was it for my mom.
What time period would that have been when she moved up here?
Well, I want to say it's about 64.
I was going to say it was in the 60s.
Yeah, it was about 64. My mom was born 1954. So it was about 64, 66
okay, she's
when they
3
moved
years
up.
older than I am.
And so
I always thought I could be your daddy.
my dad's 79.
Yo.
Yes. So when folk go, I'm old enough to be your dad.
You say,
let's have this conversation.
Remember, you were a big family too. So.
Yeah. So I mean, school for my family was not. It wasn't. It was something. And when I talk to my mom about it now, and I tell her some of the things that I would have liked to have had. She apologizes and she's like, I didn't know. I'm sorry because it wasn't like this was something that I knew how to do. Yeah. I didn't have it for myself, from my parents, and I didn't have it myself. So I wasn't really sure how to push you and make sure that and help you to get through school.
Because she had no example.
Absolutely.
And we don't understand. A lot of people make quick judgments about generations. They don't realize how important example is.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, in my family, my father was the only person who went to college. My mother was 16 when she dropped out of school. None of my siblings, nor my cousins, or any of the uncles and aunts, none of them went to college. So I understand very little. But that whole idea of, and this is the question I want to ask you, is what do you think it was within you that made you decide that I'm going to do this differently? I'm going to get more education than just a high school diploma.
Honestly, I could say I don't necessarily know if it was something in me.
Okay.
But I believe strongly in the favor of God.
Okay.
And one of the things that I was sharing with a friend of mine is that although my parents may not have known, and we were poor, we grew up poor Black people in the heart of Baltimore City. We grew up in the ghetto. I had surrounding me just different adults at different points in time in my life that dropped little seeds, that planted seeds. And while for the time that they were in my life, they attempted to like nurture and water and care for. So for example, at 7 years old, I walked around the corner from my house, and there was a recreation center that sat on the corner of Greenmount Avenue and 24th Street in Baltimore City. And we lived on 24th Street and Brentwood Avenue. So it's just one block away from where we live. And the recreation center, for those who don't know, because I was actually talking to someone who had no idea what a recreation center is. The recreation center was somewhere for young people to go and to get an experience of basketball, track, dance. There were adults there who mentored and cared for and coached kids.
Which were really the early YMCA, and WCA were meant to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now we have in Baltimore. There was there's the YMCA and the YWCA, but
was it segregated?
It's absolutely.
Yeah, so
highly segregated.
You didn't have access to it anyway.
We did not have access to the YMCA or the YWCA.
Nope.
But what we did have was the recreation centers that were in our communities and our neighborhoods. And so at the recreation center, I walked around to the recreation center, and I talked with the basketball coach, and I told him I wanted to play basketball. And I had no idea how to play basketball. I'd never even dribbled a basketball. But I saw it as an opportunity for me to engage with other kids, for me to step away from what had become normal. And what had become normalcy in our lives was violence. That we witness day in, day out as kids. Even, just sitting on our front steps or on our back porch. Like it was everywhere. We were surrounded by
Hearing gunshots on a regular basis was not a big deal.
Oh, no, it was not. It was, there were Friday night shootouts. That transpired between the guys that lived on the side of Greenmount Avenue that I lived on versus the guys that lived on, there was a park that separated them. And they were called, it was literally called like Across the Park. And so, and these guys, they were constantly in strife and there was just an ongoing of violence. And it was so easy to be sucked into it because it was normal. It was, it was the thing to do. And so I just started playing basketball. And I can remember while I was playing basketball, there were so many like older girls and guys that had known like my older brothers and kind of like took me under their wing. And in them taking me under their wing, it's like, you're different. And you're going to be different. So what I noticed is that a lot of the friends that I had in my neighborhood, while I was 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old, playing basketball, and at that point now also running track and being good enough to be able to travel and go out of state and eventually even going out of the country. A lot of those friends that I had in my community, they were now, they were teen moms. I had a friend who was, she had 12 years old, had a kid.
Lord.
They were caught up in gangs. They were, going to jail. A friend who was 13 years old, and at 13 years old was sentenced to life, like a life sentence. There was just so much, just heartache and trial.
And if
surrounding.
that's all you know, you think that is the world.
That is normal. But I feel like having these coaches and these people around me to see something in me and say, there's an opportunity. If you want to take it, there's an opportunity for you to go here and run. The very first time that I ever left the state was with my track team and my basketball team. Like I'd never gone out of, besides going down to Eastern Shore to see family. I'd never gone anywhere outside of Baltimore City until I started running track and playing basketball. And, and for me, I feel like that is what drew me away. And then my parents were so heavy in the church. We woke up and went to church. we had church for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I feel like that also, helped to set me apart, because some of the things that, some people around me may have seen as, this is the thing to do. For me, it's like, okay, that may be the thing for you to do, but that's not for me.
But not all kids who went to church on a regular basis were able to rise up above.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
They could be in the church, but at the same time caught up in the world in which they live.
That was another conversation.
The constant battle must be really tough.
It is. It's, what, I realized at a young age, I must have been about 14, and I said to my mom, I'm like, all the girls that I grew up with in church, suddenly it was like I didn't fit in.
Wow.
Like I would come around and it's like, Delass is coming. So it was just like, things that they thought to be fun. I guess it was, for me, it was just like, nah, that's not, I don't see that as fun. Or, the partying, and those were just things that I was never really into. But my parents were really strict too. So it was something that I could never get into.
And yet at the same, see, it always amazes me, and I know you kind of implied earlier that it was really an act of God's grace in your life. And we can never explain that, because we'll say, why in my life, but not why in that life, and we were there together. And I don't think we could ever explain that. All the seminary we go to, lads, ain't going to explain that.
It's not. It's
and yet,
no way to explain
if we understand it really, then we're extremely humbled by the fact that God would say, you're mine.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring people into your life, and your life is going to be different because I've called you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like that is what it is. It is extremely humbling, because even in my own immediate family, when I look at some of like my brothers and some of their different situations and stories, and it's just like, we grew up in the same house.
Yep.
And to know that my brothers that grew up with me as a kid, that were there with me, it's 5 of them, and then me as the only girl, and still to this day, all 5 of them, like I'm the only one who has gone through to not just do, have a high school diploma and undergraduate degree, but a graduate degree. And these are not things that I have one of my younger brothers who is, striving towards that, but even for him, he hasn't reached that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it just amazes me when I think about how, we grew up in one of my brothers from a young age. He was just a teenager. As a teenager, he was sentenced to a life sentence in prison, and now at 44 years old, he's still in prison. And I mean, we grew up in the same house. And it's just like, why can't I just push that favor over, for him? Yeah. And as a kid, I couldn't see that. But now as an adult, I look at it as though because he's in that situation doesn't mean that the favor of God and God's grace hasn't been with him.
No.
Because I believe that God's grace is all over him.
That's right.
Especially to keep him in, an environment that he's been in for as many years that he's been in that environment. And to not just keep him and cover him, but cover him in a way that, that same set apart that I was able to sit back and oh wow, God set me apart at an early age. I can see that with him.
Yeah.
Some of the situations that the young men get into in prison, he's a mentor. And he's able to, mentor to these young men. And he's graduated from, even though he's in prison and has been in prison since he was 16 years old, he's graduated from University of Baltimore as an honor student. He's accomplished so many things in the situation that he's in. And I'm like, just that is nothing but, the favor of God.
And we can't go there today, but
No.
I'll tell you, just listening to you, I'm thinking, oh man, we have to talk about prison reform because listen to that. There's just something wrong. There's just something awfully wrong when someone does all of that to improve themselves, and yet because of the way the law is worded and our prison system, the way it's conducted, is that he's in there, I guess, for life. And okay, God can use him where he is. There's no question about it. All things work to the good. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that our system there's something terribly wrong.
Oh, that's a conversation. You need to be ready for that.
Yeah,
we'll
have
a conversation for another day, guy.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff. Because I want to say this, particularly, certainly for our listeners, and in particular, members of this congregation. God gave this congregation a vision, and part of it was to follow Jesus everywhere, even into our neighborhood. Part of that vision was to call someone who would come here as director of youth and college ministries to help us reach our community, not just ourselves. And there's no question in my mind that God called you here because of your experience growing up in the toughest of circumstances with generational poverty as a part of your own legacy and what you've experienced through your ancestors and your most immediate with your mom and grandparents. But it gives you a heart for the kids that are in this city.
Absolutely.
Nobody has to explain to you. And you can talk to kids without having to explain where you've been because they'll know.
Right.
They'll know.
Kids are amazing that way. It's like they read it.
Yep.
They read you. They're able to read you before you even begin to open your mouth to explain anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to know if you're trying to fake it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's funny that you say that because I remember having a conversation not long ago with someone here at the church, and they were telling me about someone's situation, a family that was really going through who had come to the church, and I went to say oh yeah, I understand, and they were like, how can you understand?
Yeah.
You have a college degree. And my thought was, is no way that you could know my story.
Mm-mm.
Because it's like if you did, you wouldn't even have made that statement, because it's so much more to the individual beyond, their education.
Yep.
Just to understand, the hurdles that may have had to been jumped to get the education.
And we are prone to make quick snap judgments without really taking the time to hear a person's story and to know where they've come from and their struggle that's brought them to where they are. And that's a fallacy. We suffer because of it a lot. So, how's it going with your position at First Presbyterian? I could already see the look on it. What do you want to hear?
Where do you want me to start? I can say that, like, in this short time that I've been here at First Pres, I've grown to love this place. I felt like I came through the door loving it, though. There was just this immediate love for First Presbyterian, but there has been, and COVID has a lot to do with it.
Oh my gosh!
But there's been like this battle, unlike anything that I've ever experienced with the youth ministry, and just trying to maintain the youth ministry, but not just maintain it, help it to grow. Yeah. Help to build some bridges between the church and the community, the church and the schools that are in this community, and the neighborhood associations that are in the community.
But that's what you were called to do.
Oh my gosh! But and I'm like, okay, God, I'm here for this. I'm here for this. And I look at every experience that I've had so far, even the ones that didn't necessarily feel so good as it's happening, as a part of the process. So that and I'm like, there's always something for me to learn. There's always something for me to learn. I know that just not long ago I had, not a great experience because I started this, interview off by saying first, I am a mama. Yeah. And that's, that's a hat that I can't put down.
No. It's who you are.
It is. All day long. All day, every day. Oh my gosh. But when I'm not just, I don't know how to even explain it, because it's like, I'm not just a mama. I am a single mother at this point. Yep. I'm raising my children alone. Yep. We are in a new state where I don't have family and friends here that I could just, rely on. And I don't have that, that support of a mate here with my children.
Right.
There will be times where, if my children aren't well, or, something comes up and I need to have my kids with me.
Yeah.
And I need to know that when we're coming into First Pres, this is a safe space for us.
Right.
This is a space where we are welcomed, we are wanted, we are loved. And Guy, I gotta be honest, I can't say that is what I've always felt.
Yeah.
And when that energy presents itself, to be able to step back and not address it as a mother, but address it as a woman who loves God, who loves God enough to know when it's appropriate for me to address it and when it is not.
And I remember telling you, probably in the first interview, I don't remember, we've had many, many conversations, was honest with you that First Presbyterian is in its own self-discovery period. And some of it is learning to be much more honest with its own past and its present, the realities, what it wants to be, what it would hope it is, and the reality of where it is not, where it's falling short. And if we don't face that with a certain amount of transparency and honesty among ourselves, I think we do more damage than if we're just simply call it for what it is. It's not easy for a congregation that would like to rest on its laurels, which there were many people, that we did what we needed to do regarding racial reconciliation back in 1965. Done, finished, okay, move on.
What's next, right?
No, not at all. We're finding now that there's a lot more work. And I had told you in the beginning, I felt God called you here to help us do that work. In part, I felt badly saying that because it sounds like, oh my gosh, you're a sacrificial lamb. But who am I to argue with God?
Hey, I mean, I realized that, and I'm like, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Because if that's been my prayer since a kid, as a teenager, God, just use me.
Yeah.
Use me. I don't know if you remember, there was a cartoon, it's like Gumby, where
Yeah.
he's like this, and I remember having the toy. This green little flexible thing that you can kind of bend and shape. And I can remember praying and asking God to use me as like a Gumby little toy, like wherever I need to be.
Be careful praying like that.
I mean, hey, I'm like, if I can reach someone that way, like, mold me, shape me, move me. God, there's an excitement that comes with that.
Yeah.
And I know there's also there's a deep pain that comes with it. But I feel like that pain, it's like a painting.
Yeah.
Like where when you're putting together a painting, it's not in the beginning, it doesn't look all that great because you're putting it together. But as you're adding all these different colors and this different strokes with the brush, it becomes this beautiful image.
Yeah.
And I see our lives as that.
Yeah.
When we put ourselves in a position for God to be able to mold us and move us as he needs to connect with those we're meant to connect with.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, there's such great power in just being in a space to be okay with that. I'll be that sacrificial lamb.
And having fun with the surprises that God has in mind.
Oh my gosh.
The things that we never expect, that we learn about ourselves as well as one another, and certainly about God.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I read this book not too long ago. It was called Multicultural Congregations and the Power of Race.
Okay.
A black woman who was in another industry and then decided to go study religion at a school and then needed to do a dissertation. And she decided to pick up on this and went and actually stayed in a multicultural congregation for months, interviewing members and pastors and the whole nine yards. And while she was there, the head pastor, who was white, left. And a new pastor came in who was black. And what she found was that even if a congregation is multicultural and seems to embrace that, it still tends to have an overarching white power structure, whether it's stated or not. And those of our black brothers and sisters, because they've been taught for so long to take a subservient position and do not rock the boat, they will go along with the white structure just to keep peace.
Yep.
And because they value being in a multicultural congregation, or that congregation represents a style of worship and government and whatever it is that they value, they'll stay there, even they know that everybody knows that ultimately the white people are the ones. It's their culture that and tells a story of even that the pastor who came in reflected that he even had adapted himself because he had gone to a seminary that was predominantly white, that he had even, and so she says that if congregations aren't aware of that, then they avoid the tough conversations.
I believe that if the congregation, even if they are aware of it, those tough conversations are not necessarily going to be always welcomed.
No.
And they're going to be difficult even to get started.
Yep. She said people left because people who had, quote unquote, come there because it was multicultural and they wanted to be a part of it, particularly white, left when they began to see more and more of what that meant if they really genuinely became a multicultural congregation where power is shared. And even cultures our different cultures, worship styles. Oh my gosh, that was a
God.
major issue.
I gotta tell you, that's really tough to see.
Mm-hmm.
A church that says that we want to be multicultural and actually sticks to it as you begin to see what a multicultural church really consists of, what it looks like.
Well, I'm going to say this, and this might be a bombshell.
Go ahead.
But I'm known for this right now for our podcast. So one of the places where it showed where they had trouble was in the youth ministry. Because what happened was they started to reach out to the community, and more kids of color came.
Oh, yeah.
And the kids who were white at first thought that was cool. But they didn't live right in the community. They lived outside the area where the church was located. Sound familiar?
Oh.
And as time went on, all of a sudden, the kids started leaving, saying, well, this isn't where I go to school, and these aren't the kids I'm really friends with. So they wanted to go to the churches where their friends were. When she really started digging and talking to people, she found a couple of parents who, in a moment of weakness, admitted that they were a little concerned that these city kids were coming into the youth group. And what if one of them wants to date my daughter? And they couldn't deal with it.
Wow.
That suddenly that worried them. They weren't sure that they would be able to deal with an interracial dating situation with their own children. Mm-hmm. And multicultural, and it wasn't just racial, but it was cultural in regard to city versus outlying area, a whole group of things. But ultimately what it came down to was white culture versus
race. Cultures
that are non-white. And people, and so even when she left, I mean, it wasn't all resolved. The end of the book doesn't resolve anything. Mm-hmm. It just exposes the realities of, no matter how sincere you might think you are, if you don't face the realities of what this meant, especially in power sharing, you're going to get blindsided as a congregation. I know I opened a Pandora's box, didn't I?
Oh, Guy. I think with that, you did. You definitely did. I think that
I know this is
our
hard.
youth ministry, when I first came here, there were, the families, the support that I saw that's one of the things that really attracted me here.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh my gosh, I'll have the support that I need from the families. The young people are here, they're present, they want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome.
Not now.
I have 2 students that participate regularly and that come, and I have to be honest, because I reach out. I feel like I've been reaching out to families, and I'm just like, to the point where, what is it that I need to do to reach your kid where they are?
Yeah.
Let me support your family however I can support your family, whatever that looks like, because I want to be a part of their lives. And I want them to be able to, be a part of the other students in the youth ministry in their lives. But what I've seen is that is not what we have here.
No.
And I really I want to be completely honest.
Well, I opened the door for you.
You did, and I thank you for that. I don't know if it's race related. I've gotten wind of it. I definitely have gotten wind, that may be what it is, and I've spoken to some people here at the church who would say on any day that they are not at all racist.
Yeah.
And they they support the Black Lives Matter movement, or they're all for this change that the church is doing. But I've witnessed that those same people say things or do things that have been absolutely racially motivated, or I've had experiences myself that are extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the best way for me to handle it is for me to step out and not look at it as though it is, a direct against me and who I am, but more so just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And so I make this statement often. I pray for you on your way in, and I'll pray for you on your way out.
Way out.
So it's like if this youth ministry, because I've been that, out in the community.
I know you are.
That's where I am, because I believe that relational ministry is the wave of the future.
Absolutely.
When we think about how the church is going to grow and prosper and do well, and how we're going to do that thing that God has called us to do, to teach and to reach generations, to go out into the communities, how we're going to do that is by actually going out into the community. Yeah. And I'm not sure how families feel about that. I really am not sure, but I know how I feel about it. I believe that's something God wants me to do. And so, yeah, I absolutely am all for going out into the communities, going into the schools, the city schools, and having that mixture of city kids with suburban kids, and we all having that one thing in common, and that being the love of Christ. That I feel like that right there should be enough to just get us started.
Yeah.
Even if we run into some interference.
Yeah. Or even if we can't model what you're talking about of what it means to be one in Christ, then how can we expect to share the good news of Jesus Christ with kids who've never been exposed to the good news and say, oh, this is what the church is about, and they look at it and say, oh, how they hate one another, rather than, oh, how they love one another.
Can't tell you how many times I hear that. Not just from young people, or not just from like folk who are my age.
Mm-hmm.
That conversation is, I'm not for it, because I've seen what the church is like.
Yep.
And for the younger ones, when they witness that kind of powerful love and just genuine love, I've heard comments like, I was just completely blown away. I didn't know. I had no idea, because that wasn't my experience, and that wasn't when I think of the church, that wasn't how I saw the church. Last year when we did the interview with the two young ladies who led the protest,
Letty and
Zippy, they who graduated, by the way, congratulations.
Yes, they did. And one's on her way to Fordham University.
Fordham University.
Zipporah is.
One of the things that they said when we were talking to them was they didn't expect to have the support of a church.
Yeah.
And that is what young people think when they think of the church, because of the lack thereof of the church's presence in their community.
Yep.
When you really look at the fact that First Presbyterian sits in the middle of this Northeast York community, like, there's no way that the people in this community do not, like, it's no reason why we shouldn't have a better relationship. It shouldn't just be, and kudos for the dinners, which are awesome. The Palm Sunday dinner and Thanksgiving dinner, and the fact that we have a wonderful care ministry that helps out when folk are in need, but it goes beyond that.
Absolutely.
It is about community. It is about relationship. We're here in this community. Like, open the doors, open the gates.
Yeah.
Get out.
But you also said it's relationships. Relationships take time to form. You don't just go out to somebody and say, I want to be in relationship with you.
How long has this church been here?
260 some years.
Come on, guy.
No, it takes work, especially if you don't live here.
I don't live in this community.
No, I know you don't.
That was that's one of my biggest regrets. I think about it often. I love my home,
Yeah.
but when I was looking to buy, I was told don't buy in York City.
Yeah.
But that's one of my biggest regrets, because I feel as though the difference there is that living in York City, you have an opportunity to reach people and connect with the people on a totally different level than living on the outside of the city
Yeah,
and
because you're
coming
walking
in.
down the street to the convenience store, whatever, talking with
There's
people,
an
whatever.
opportunity to really build relationship. And it's not to say that you can't build relationship with your neighbors and York County, because you can, and I have. I'm grateful for those relationships, but there's a different type of like contentment with the families that I've built relationships with in York County versus those that I'm like still trying to break those barriers in York City.
Yeah.
And the church is here in York City.
Yep.
We don't just want people coming from
for a long
outside.
time. First was able, and I don't mean to sound critical, because I don't. I love this congregation. I'm so glad I could retire here. But for a long time, First Presbyterian could get away with just doing its own thing, sitting here on the corner of Queen and East Market Street, and not really thinking much about who was surrounding them and who were living in those houses that are 1 or 2 blocks away, that are, poverty. There's no other way to.
Who's to say that we still can't? We can.
We can, but people, but we got away with it for a long, long time. And when God started to shake this congregation a couple years ago, and then the vision came, and I will admit it was a limited number of people who participated in it. So they were the people we were listening to. I was co-chair, and they were limited, but it was clear from those who were participating, we believe God's calling us to get into the neighborhood. That was clear. With that being said, this caveat, there were a bunch of people sitting on the outskirts saying, we'll just see where this goes and whether I like it or not. And some have voted with their feet and said, no, I don't like it.
And walked away from the church.
And my response would be, okay, you can argue with God all you want. That's okay, but we believe this is what God's called us to do.
God, when God says move, we must move.
Yep.
You don't get to pick and choose when you want to be obedient, when you want to follow God.
Yeah. And so once again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the depth of your faith and who you are as an individual and your personal integrity to be obedient and come, because this is no picnic. I mean, we're having fun. Some great things are happening here. I am so excited about what God's doing. But I am also aware of the fact that some of it is tough work.
Oh, absolutely.
And if we don't do it here, and we've talked about this in the Racial Justice Committee, we don't do the work here, how dare us go out there and tell anybody how to do it when we haven't done it in our own midst with our own brothers and sisters?
First. Yeah.
That's right. And we've had our Black brothers and sisters here that have been patient for decades, not just a couple years, for decades. Some of them saying, I've waited for this day. But it's still not easy. The day has come, but it's still not easy. And there will be a filtering. God love them. God love them for those who just cannot deal with it. Because, with your reaching out into the community and the Spirit's with you and you're successful, God's successful through you, and there are going to be people from the community coming in. Yeah.
That's the prayer.
Yeah,
that is the hope.
But let's also deal with the reality of what that means now. Okay? We need to be more, we need to be that Gumby that says, okay, it's not my culture, but it's theirs. So how do we bring them side by side to reflect the diversity and the beauty of the body of Christ?
Yeah. I often think about how God is so creative, right?
I know.
And God's wonderful use of difference. Who are we to decide that we don't like God's creative.
Yep.
Like, God created each of us different.
Mm-hmm.
We look different. We have, our culture is different.
Yeah.
Our experiences are different.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it less than. It doesn't, there isn't some sort of hierarchy based on, the color of our skin or our life's experiences.
No.
Like, no, God is calling us all. He said, come, let us go.
Yeah.
Not, you go because you have privilege and you had a better upbringing and you live, in a better situation. No, come, let us go. And he didn't have a preference when he said us.
No.
I mean, come on now. Jesus sat with some folk here.
Yeah, I know. I know. And I always go back to that incredible image of John in Revelation. And he mentions uncountable number, the people of the nations had gathered before the throne of God. What an incredible image. The people of the nations.
It is awe-inspiring.
It is.
Yeah.
And in heaven, there won't be like, well, how'd you get here? Well, by the grace of God. And you're right. It's not that God doesn't care about our differences. God loves
He loves
our
us.
differences
Yes.
because it reflects who God is ultimately at God's very core.
Yep.
Wow, we didn't get all, so we're going to take a pause right here because this is going to be more than 1 hour. But I know what happened with Chris Hunter, and we didn't know where to stop. So we're going to stop a moment. KG. And then we're going to start again for part 2 because I need to talk about the programs.
Okay.
What we're doing. But what we've talked about has been awesome prelude then to talk about what's going on. And I want people to know, folks, you need to know what's going on here at first through Delass and the way God's using her. So great having you as a guest. And in a moment, we'll be right back.
When Jesus washed, oh, when he washed, when Jesus washed, he washed my sins away.